Hail you well and welcome all. I'm the Jake of all trades, and today we're continuing our discussion on dungeons and how to create them. Last week we asked some questions, the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, and why, and used that to kind of conceptualize our dungeon in our heads before we started putting anything down on paper. Well, today we're going to put stuff down on paper. We're going to try to use an example from the first one and use that to create our dungeon today. And I'll have a link to that first video in the description as well. So if you missed that one, check it out before you watch this one, because a lot of stuff won't make sense otherwise. So first things first, for your dungeon, you want to know how big is it going to be? And that question is kind of how much do you want to challenge your players? For a lighter challenge, an easier challenge, you want to do a smaller dungeon. Think like one floor with like 5 to 10 rooms, maybe like 12 or so at the most. If you want to have a more challenging dungeon for your players, make it bigger. Go 2 or 3 floors and make it like 20 or 30 rooms, something that'll take them a few good sessions to work their way through. Remember to focus on the who and the what for this part of the dungeon. Now, was it created by a mad mage? Make sure that it features like some crazy architecture and some nonsensical puzzles and other bizarre things that you might expect in like a funhouse dungeon. Is it an abandoned mine? Make it look like an abandoned mine. Lots of tunnels and shafts. Perhaps the players can see rusted pickaxes and shovels, and there's like ore. They can see different minerals or metals glittering in the walls of the cave or mine that they are exploring. We're going to be building an old dilapidated keep, and we want to go for a medium size. I'm thinking like 1 floor with like 10 rooms. I was going to do 2 floors with like 20 rooms, but I realized that would make this video absurdly long, and I want to try to keep these a little shorter so that it's like more informative and less just me talking. So we're going smaller size, 1 floor, 10 rooms. It was burned out a couple decades ago, so some hallways and doorways and stairs may have collapsed. There's going to be a small section on my map that I show you in a moment where the stairs, you can see where the stairs have burned out, and that's what would lead to a 2nd floor and possibly like a dungeon level below as well. So if you want to take the initiative and add that, go ahead and do it. If you are interested in seeing that, I did sketch out that stuff. I just don't think there's time for it. So if you're interested, let me know in the comments, and I'll be sure to make maybe a part 3 to this, and I'll show you what the 2nd floor and the dungeon level look like. So here is our dungeon over here. You can see I've got 10 rooms marked out, and there's a staircase as well that would lead up or down. We're going to start first with populating our dungeon with some random stuff. So what are we going to do? We need to put not just monsters in here. We also want to focus on like filling all of the rooms with just random stuff. So sometimes, I mean, it could be piles of dirty rags, it could be burned out torches, rusted armor and weapons. You want to try to make it feel like an actual place. There doesn't have to be monsters in every single room, though. In fact, sometimes it can really help build the tension if there isn't monsters in every single room, because then they don't know what they're getting into. If you put monsters in every room, they know that they're going to kick down the door and kick some ass every time they open a door. But if you want them to kind of be on their toes and have to think about stuff, then you'll have a couple rooms in there where it's monsters and a couple rooms where it's just random stuff. Perhaps there's some overlooked treasure you want them to find too. You can hide that away somewhere. I didn't include that on my map though, so. And I should have covered this in the last video, but you also want to be thinking about whether there is a plot to your dungeon. Is there, what are they here for? This kind of goes with the why, like why are your players coming here sort of angle that you want to focus on. Is it a vampire's lair? Is there a lost artifact that they're trying to recover? Lost treasure, an heirloom, something like that? Like, what are they doing here? Because this is going to help you decide what kind of monsters you want to put in this video or in this dungeon. So yeah, use those as an option for what kind of monsters you should put in. So speaking of, let's try to add some mobs. I said that this keep was going to be in the hills of a region or something like that, and so let's put some monsters that kind of fit well in there. I'm not including very much. I think I'm just going to do some ogres and some goblins because they go kind of well together, and they're both, they make sense for this kind of area that we're in right now. Now, something to remember, monsters are not just static things. These are living, breathing creatures, and you want to treat them as such. So make sure that they are not just sitting around while your players are in there or approaching. You want to make sure that they move around. You want to make sure that they're doing stuff like gathering food, forging weapons, eating food. Have them doing stuff. Don't just have them sitting there waiting for your players to show up, because that's just, I'm all about believability, and that just kind of breaks it for me personally. So you can either wing it, or you can create a short guide for these wandering encounters. I would just probably wing it, but if you want to have like a more thorough thing, you can like line out paths that they might take through the keep, different things that they might do at different times of the day, and this will help have them moving. Like say that there's a group of these goblins who are out foraging or scavenging or hunting for food when your players arrive at the keep. Your players could get in and secure the first few rooms and think they're safe, and then a group of goblins comes back from the hunt, and now all of a sudden the players have a group of monsters behind them that they weren't expecting, and that can kind of amp things up, create a little bit of drama, a little bit of excitement, a little bit of like what's going to happen. So think about that when you are creating your dungeon. What are your monsters doing? What's their daily routine look like? And if you're using intelligent monsters for your dungeon, which we are in this one, ogres and goblins, I mean, they're not overly intelligent, but they can speak, they can think, and we're going to have them make some traps and stuff, perhaps. We want to make sure these are living, breathing creatures, and they don't like being disturbed, they don't like things surprising them, so they're going to create some traps maybe, so that anyone who tries to mess with them will hopefully get taken out before that happens. It's just this is a good indicator of like this is a smart thing, and it knows that there are the threats nearby. It's not just some wild animal. It has hands. It can make stuff. It can think. It can feel a little bit. So make some traps. Have some fun with that. Maybe some pitfalls, some darts, some falling rocks, stuff like that. Just some really easy stuff that'll also like kind of reaffirm that fact that these are living creatures, and that your players want to stay on their toes. And change the environment too. So if you have smart monsters, they're going to work with the environment to make it suit their needs. So I mentioned we have ogres in here; those are large creatures, and we have goblins; those are small creatures. So the large creatures, they're going to stick to these like double-doored areas over here. They're not going to be going into those tighter hallways through those smaller doors. Well, unless there's something they wanted. Maybe there's a room that they wanted access to, and so they bust down one of the walls so that they can create an entryway for themselves. That's something to think about if you want to add a little bit of interesting, a little interesting effect for your players to see when they're going through here. They could see a wall that's been busted down right in the middle or something like that, and they're like, who did this? Why did this happen? Get them thinking. If they haven't seen the ogres yet, this could be a really interesting way to show them that they're up against something that's pretty big. And the goblins, they're a lot smaller, so you want to have them sticking to just like the normal like size rooms with just the single doors, perhaps over on the right-hand side of our map over here. And if you had a basement, then they could go to the basement too. I mean, the ogres aren't going to fit down that tiny little stairway, so the goblins might be able to come up with some sort of system to go up and down, and also to a second floor if you wanted to include one of those. Just something to think about. If there was a second floor, and the second floor I created, I decided like, oh, it's just going to be like all goblins up here because the ogres can't get up there. So it's just that's like the goblins' territory. They just kind of hang out upstairs. Things to think about. But if you're using other kinds of creatures, think of ways that they might change the environment. Large creatures, like I said, they might make doors for themselves so they can get around more easily. Smaller creatures are going to work into the areas where larger creatures can't really get to. And you think about other things too, like if there's light sensitive creatures that are sensitive to bright lights, they might avoid rooms with windows, or perhaps they'll try to black windows out. If there's creatures that are flying, you know that they're going to be sticking around near the top of the building, not the bottom. They want to be able to fly in, make a nest or something like that, and be able to fly out with ease. So these are just things to think about while you are populating your dungeon with monsters. And if you're using a variety of monsters, another thing you want to think about is monster ecology. How do these monsters work with one another? Do they work together? Are they at odds and ends with each other? Do they cooperate? These are the questions you want to be asking. A really awesome tool for this is the Monster Ecology Anthology, and I'm going to provide a link to that down below in the video description. It's a really cool free document that I found online, and it's a lot of people put a lot of work into just talking about a bunch of different monsters, and there's a lot of really cool information. It talks about the different types of monsters, their behavior and mannerisms and stuff like that, but there's a small section on a lot of these monsters where it's like which monsters get along, like what do these monsters go well with, who do they get along with, who have they been known to cooperate with. And I find that very useful when I do something like this because it lets me know, hey, I could use goblins and ogres, and the ogres would treat the goblins as like little servants, and the goblins would be, they would be so intimidated by the ogres that they wouldn't want to mess with them, or try to cheat them, or run away from them or something like that. These goblins are very much in service to these ogres, and I mean they make a nice little package when you think about it like that. For room number 1, I have them all labeled there. I said that that's the Great Hall, essentially, what used to be the Great Hall. And there's going to be a big fire in the center of that room, and there's going to be piles of bones strewn about the floor, perhaps like some old rags and stuff like that as well, old clothing, that maybe in some cases. And we want 4 ogres sitting in that room around this big fire, kind of maybe munching away or eating or something like that. Room 2, that used to be an old watch room right next to the Great Hall there. Throw in some rusted half plate, maybe some arrows and a bow or something like that. Just something to show your players that, hey, this used to be a watch room, but it's currently not being used for anything else. And I decided to leave that room empty aside from that. Room 3, that's the old armory, and in there I put some rusted armored weapons, more so than in the watch room. There's going to be a large table in there, and that would have been used for like laying out arms and armor and stuff like that. But now the ogres are using that to slaughter their animals for eating. So have a large table in there. You can have the rusted armor and stuff like that, and then maybe there's also just like a bunch of like animal hide, animal bones, leftover chunks of like rotten meat, stuff like that. Stuff to show them like what this used to be and what it's being used for now. And I also thought, hey, maybe we should throw a couple ogres in there too. So there's 2 ogres in there, and they're like the chefs. They work on carving up the animals for everyone to eat, pretty much. Room 4, that's the old kitchen. That's just going to be a huge mess of pots and cookware and stuff like that. I decided to put like a fireplace in there, like a large oven sort of thing, that at least that's what it would have been used as like a cooking stove or something like that. That's going to be the chief's room. And you can see that room 3 and room 4 are connected to room 1 with like double doors, essentially. There's a small hallway in between 1 and 4, but they have double doors leading in and out, and so that means that the ogres can get into these rooms with ease. And number 4, I decided that one, hey, that's going to be the chief ogre's room. There's always got to be a chief, right? And this you can beef this guy up a little bit, make him a little bit tougher than the other guys, so your players know what's going on. Maybe give him a spell or 2 if you want to make him more like a shaman sort of figure. But however you want to do it, this is where that guy's going to be staying. Room 5, that's the old barracks. There, the beds are in disarray and probably pushed off to the side maybe. There's several chests with random and useless items filling them. Dirty rags, bones, little small baubles, maybe some small chunks of like silver or something like that, like unrefined ores, stuff like that. And one of the beds is like has the mattress torn off of it, and it's just covered in blood and stuff like that. This is where the goblins are slaughtering their food. And we want to put 4 goblins in here. And the goblins are going to be pretty much taking up the rooms 5 through 10, essentially, are all goblin rooms, because those are ones with just single doors. Again, like I said, if you wanted to, you could bust out one of those walls, and then the ogres would have an opportunity to get into that room. But for now, we're just going to say, hey, the goblins take this half of the keep, the ogres take that half. Now we go to rooms 6 through 10. These are all pretty much going to be the same, which is just like a bunch of disheveled beds. Have some chests with random useless items, again, like bones and dirty rags. Goblins like collecting useless crap like that, and so we can add a little bit of flavor if you can think of some weird things, like maybe like melted down candles, so it's just like puddles of wax, essentially, or something like that. I don't know. Have some fun with it. Have your players like be like, ooh, treasure, and then they open the chest, and it's like, oh, this is a bunch of junk. This is not treasure. It can be kind of fun to kind of throw them for a loop like that. And you want to put a couple goblins in these rooms. Like I said, you don't want to fill every room with monsters though. So maybe leave like 9 and 10 are empty, and they mostly stay in like rooms 6, 7, and 8. Maybe there's like a couple of them in there, each of those rooms. That way, if your players sneak into the front doors of the keep, they see the ogre sitting there, they see a door off to the right hand side, they might want to peel over there instead of engaging in combat with these ogres right away. Maybe get a sense of their bearings before they initiate combat. So they go through that doorway and they can find a couple rooms over on that side of the keep that are completely empty, and it gives them time to kind of stop and think for a moment and decide what their next course of action is going to be. Okay, well there we go. We now have a keep. We've got it filled with monsters and all kinds of other random stuff. Perhaps, like I said, you want to slip some hidden treasure in there that was overlooked by the ogres and the goblins. Perhaps you want to create that second floor or the basement. Feel free to do so. This is for you guys. This is just a little something I whipped up as an example for, kind of this is how my brain works when I'm building a dungeon like this. And so I hope that this has provided some insight for you on how to do this thing. Hopefully it's inspired you to create your own dungeon. And if you do create your own dungeon, let me know how that goes. Let me know if there's any tips that worked out for you, if there's anything you thought of that was, kind of put your players in a bind or threw them for a loop. Just let me know in the comments below. I'm really excited to hear about that stuff. In the meantime, you guys have a good one, and I will see you later.